Have you ever felt it? A subtle crack in the very foundation of your reality. It is not a loud, cataclysmic event, but a quiet, internal tremor, a hairline fracture in the stone of what you once called your life. The world you once knew, the one that seemed so solid, so predictable, so real, suddenly reveals itself to be a flimsy stage set. The ambitions that once drove you with a ferocious hunger, the next promotion, the bigger house, the validation of your peers, now seem like a child's game, a frantic rearranging of furniture in a burning room. The beliefs you once held as unshakable truths, the political ideologies and social conventions you wore like a second skin, now feel like comforting fairy tales you were told to keep the dark at bay. A profound and terrifying question begins to echo in the silent chambers of your mind, a question that undermines everything. If all of this is an illusion, then who am I? This is the beginning. This is the first whisper of the spiritual awakening, the initial, often unwelcome call to a journey from which there is no return. Popular culture, in its desperate attempt to commodify everything sacred, has painted this experience as a blissful, light-filled ascension, a gentle unfolding into a state of permanent peace, love, and serene wisdom. It is sold as a wellness product, a weekend retreat, a guaranteed path to a happier, more fulfilling and more productive life. It is presented as a lovely, desirable accessory to the life you already have. But let me tell you a truth that is as dangerous as it is liberating. This is the greatest, most seductive lie of our time. A true spiritual awakening is not a gentle blossoming. It is a brutal, agonizing demolition. It is the complete and utter dismantling of every lie you have ever told yourself, every mask you have ever worn, every comfort zone you have ever hidden within. It is not an addition to your life, it is a subtraction of everything that is not you. Carl Jung, who dedicated his life to mapping the treacherous, monster-filled oceans of the human psyche, knew this with an unnerving clarity. He understood that this journey is not a gentle ascent into the light, but a terrifying descent into the darkness of one's own soul. It is a path so perilous, so fraught with psychic danger, that the vast majority of people who stumble upon it do not survive it. They do not die in the physical sense. They experience something far worse. They retreat, they abort the process, and they spend the rest of their lives as psychic ghosts, haunting the ruins of a transformation they had neither the courage nor the guidance to complete. They become the walking wounded, the permanently disillusioned, forever trapped in a spiritual no man's land, unable to go back to the dream, and terrified to go forward into the light. The first casualty, the death of the persona and the terror of the void. The first stage of this demolition, and the first great filter where most are lost, is the violent death of the persona. The persona is your identity in the world, the carefully constructed mask of your ego. It is your career, your social status, your roles as a parent, a partner, a good person, an intellectual, a rebel. For your entire life, you have believed that you are this mask. Your sense of self, your security, your very sanity are inextricably fused with it. It is the character you have been playing for so long that you have forgotten you are an actor. The spiritual awakening begins when life, in its brutal wisdom, rips this mask from your face. This can be triggered by an external event that shatters the narrative of your life, a sudden job loss that strips you of your professional identity, a devastating betrayal that annihilates your role as a trusted partner, a debilitating illness that destroys your image as a strong, capable being, the death of a loved one that erases your identity as a son or a wife. Suddenly, the identity that defined you is gone. If you are no longer the successful lawyer or the devoted husband, then who are you? This is not a philosophical question. It is a visceral, terrifying freefall into a void of non-identity. It is the feeling of having your name, your face, your entire history erased, leaving only a raw, trembling awareness. But more often, the trigger is internal. A slow, creeping sense of profound meaninglessness begins to pervade your life, like a poison gas seeping under the door. The success you have achieved tastes like ash in your mouth. The life you have built feels like a beautifully furnished cage. The applause of the world sounds hollow and distant, like an echo from someone else's life. This is the moment the ego begins to lose its grip. The vast, mysterious intelligence of the self, the totality of your being, your inner God image, is starting to emerge. And its emergence requires the dissolution of the ego's small, constricted world. This is not a peaceful transition. The ego, facing its own annihilation, will fight back with the ferocity of a cornered animal. It will flood your mind with a torrent of terrifying thoughts. You are losing your mind. You are throwing your life away. You are having a nervous breakdown. You will end up alone and destitute. It will generate intense, primordial fear, a panic so profound it feels like you are physically dying. This is where the first wave of survivors falls, terrified by the void, by the sheer raw panic of not knowing who they are. They scramble to put the mask back on. They double down on their old identity with a desperate, frantic energy. The workaholic who had a moment of clarity will work even harder, taking on more projects, chasing a bigger title. The people pleaser who felt a surge of authentic anger will become even more accommodating, desperate to regain the approval that once stabilized them. They will do anything to silence the terrifying call from the depths. They choose the familiar prison over the terrifying freedom. They have looked over the abyss and they have chosen to retreat, but they can never truly go back. The crack in reality once seen can never be unseen. They will now live their lives with the constant gnawing awareness of the lie they are living, haunted by the ghost of the authentic self they abandoned. They become cynical, bitter, and secretly resentful, forever mourning a life they were too afraid to claim. The descent into the underworld, confronting the unlived life and the accumulated shadow. For those who survive the death of the persona, who find the courage to sit in the terrifying void of not knowing, the journey leads to a place of even greater peril, the direct confrontation with the shadow. If the persona is the curated collection of who you think you are, the shadow is the vast, dark continent of everything you have denied you are. It is your repressed rage, your secret shames, your unacknowledged envy, your buried grief, your disowned power, and all the unlived life you have cast into the basement of your psyche. Every choice you have made in your life to be this was also a choice not to be that. All the roads not taken, all the potential selves you sacrificed to maintain the stability of your ego, did not simply disappear. They were relegated to the shadow, where they have been waiting. The spiritual awakening is the process by which the basement door of the psyche is blown off its hinges. Everything you have spent a lifetime suppressing comes surging up into the light of your consciousness, and it is an encounter that can shatter the unprepared mind. The good person is suddenly flooded with hateful, violent and judgmental thoughts. The disciplined, controlled individual is overwhelmed by chaotic, self-destructive impulses. The serene spiritual seeker is confronted with a profound and terrifying inner darkness, a capacity for evil they never imagined. This is the Jungian dark night of the soul, the nekia, the descent into the underworld. It is a period of profound psychological and spiritual crisis. You are not becoming a bad person, you are finally meeting the whole person. You are integrating the totality of your humanity. But the ego, with its simplistic, dualistic view of good and bad, cannot comprehend this. It interprets this influx of shadow material as a sign of total moral and psychological collapse. You believe you are going crazy, that you are becoming evil, that you have been irredeemably corrupted. This is the second and perhaps the largest filter where the journey is aborted. Faced with their own darkness, most people recoil in horror. They cannot bear the shame, the guilt, the sheer psychic intensity of it. And so they do one of two things. The first group falls into inflation. They are so overwhelmed by the repressed energy of the shadow that they identify with it. They become cynical, bitter, and arrogant. They may adopt a dark, nihilistic spirituality, seeing themselves as above the petty morality of the masses. They wield their newfound authenticity like a weapon, tearing down others to feel powerful. They have not integrated the shadow. They have simply become possessed by it. They have traded the prison of the nice persona for the prison of the dark persona. But it is a prison nonetheless. The second and more common group collapses under the weight of shame. They judge their own shadow with a brutal, unforgiving harshness. They conclude that they are fundamentally flawed, broken, and unworthy. This can lead to a profound and debilitating depression, a state of spiritual paralysis. They have come face to face with their own humanity and found it wanting. They abort the journey not out of fear of the void, but out of a deep-seated self-hatred. They mistake the necessary encounter with their own darkness for a verdict on their soul's damnation. They become stuck in a purgatory of shame, forever defined by the part of the journey they could not complete. They may turn to spiritual bypassing, using meditation or positive thinking as a new, more sophisticated way to suppress the darkness they are now so terrified of. The sickness of the spirit, the body as an alchemical vessel. For the few who navigate the perilous encounter with the shadow, who find the courage to face their own darkness without either succumbing to it or condemning it, the journey enters its most mysterious and dangerous phase. This is the stage where the awakening is no longer just a psychological process. It becomes a psycho-spiritual and often psychosomatic one. Jung knew that when the deepest contents of the unconscious, the archetypes, the raw energy of the self, begin to emerge, they can have a powerful and often violent effect on the physical body and the nervous system. The body becomes the alchemical vessel in which the lead of the old self is being transmuted into the gold of the new. And alchemy is a process of fire and dissolution. As the rigid structures of the ego dissolve, the raw, primal energy of the self begins to flow through you. This is the kundalini of the yogic traditions, the pneuma of the Gnostics. It is the life force itself, undiluted by the ego's filters. For a nervous system that has been conditioned for decades to suppress this energy, its sudden influx is like sending a tidal wave through a garden hose or 1,000 volts through a 100-volt wire. The result can be a bewildering and terrifying array of symptoms that modern medicine and psychology have no framework to understand. You may experience intense waves of energy surging through your body, causing involuntary shaking and tremors. You might have periods of profound, inexplicable fatigue, where you can barely get out of bed for weeks at a time, as your entire system undergoes a massive energetic recalibration. You may experience heart palpitations, digestive issues, chronic pain that migrates around the body, intense body heat or cold, visions, voices, and a radical hypersensitivity to your environment. Foods you once ate are now poison. The television is a psychic assault. You can feel the emotional state of others as if it were your own. Your body is not sick, it is being reborn. Your psyche is not breaking down, it is breaking through. But in a culture that pathologizes any experience outside the narrow band of the normal, this is the point where the journey is most often medicalized and aborted. The survivor goes to a doctor who, finding nothing wrong on their tests, diagnoses them with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, or a generalized anxiety disorder. They go to a therapist who, lacking a transpersonal framework, diagnoses them with psychosis, bipolar disorder, or a personality disorder. They are put on medications that numb the symptoms, that suppress the energetic process, that effectively shut down the awakening and force the emerging self back down into the unconscious. This is perhaps the most tragic failure point of all. The individual has survived the death of their identity. They have faced their own darkness, and now, on the cusp of a profound psycho-spiritual breakthrough, society itself intervenes with all its well-meaning ignorance to cure them of their own transformation. They are taught to fear their own process, to distrust their own experience. They are convinced that their spiritual emergence is a mental illness. And so they take the pills, they do the therapy that reinforces the ego, they shut the door on the numinous, they survive, but their soul is put back in its cage, now with a medical label to justify the bars. They are stabilized, but their evolution is permanently halted. The loneliness of the long-distance soul, the final exile. There is one final filter, one last great trial that awaits the rare individual who has navigated all the previous stages. It is not as dramatic as the ego's death or as terrifying as the shadow's emergence. It is a quiet, subtle, and perhaps the most painful trial of all, the trial of absolute, irrevocable loneliness. As your consciousness expands, the chasm between you and the unawakened world becomes vast and in many ways unbridgeable. You can no longer connect with people on the superficial level of the persona. The conversations that animate the rest of the world, the gossip, the politics, the drama, the obsession with material gain, feel profoundly alienating, like listening to the chatter of a language you have forgotten how to speak. You try to share a glimpse of the profound inner world you are discovering, and you are met with blank stares, polite condescension, or overt hostility. Your newfound depth is a mirror that reflects others' lack of it, and they resent you for it. Your friends and family, the very people who form your support system, become the unwitting guardians of your old self. They do not want you to change. Your transformation is a threat to their own reality. They will try, with love and with fear, to pull you back into the familiar dream. You've become so serious, they will say. We miss the old you. You think you're better than us now. They are not trying to hurt you. They are trying to save you from a journey they cannot understand, a journey that threatens the shared reality upon which your relationship was built. Every interaction becomes an act of translation, of biting your tongue, of navigating a profound sense of otherness. This is a loneliness so profound it can feel like a spiritual bereavement. You are an alien on your own planet, a stranger in your own home. You have lost the comfort of the collective dream, but you have not yet found your new tribe. You are walking a path that you must walk utterly and completely alone. For many, this final exile is simply too much to bear. The primal human need for belonging, for connection, for being understood, is so powerful that they will choose to abandon their own truth in order to be welcomed back into the warmth of the tribe. They will learn to act normal again. They will put a new, more spiritual persona back on, using the language of awakening to mask the fact that they have aborted the process. They will learn to speak the language of the dream, even though they no longer believe in it. This is the subtlest form of failure, the quiet death of the soul by 1,000 social compromises. It is the choice to be a well-liked stranger instead of an authentic exile. The birth of the survivor, life on the other side. So who are the ones who survive? Who are the few who navigate the demolition of the ego, the confrontation with the shadow, the chaos of psycho-spiritual emergence, and the desolation of profound loneliness? They are not the strongest nor the most spiritually gifted. They are the ones who possess two seemingly simple yet infinitely rare qualities: the courage to be a complete and utter beginner, and the compassion to be a friend to their own brokenness. They survive because when their identity collapses, they do not rush to build a new one. They find the courage to live in the raw, uncomfortable vulnerability of I don't know. They embrace the void as a fertile ground rather than a terrifying emptiness. They survive because when their shadow emerges, they do not judge or condemn it. They meet it with a radical curiosity, with the compassion of a parent meeting a long-lost, wounded child. They understand that the darkness is not an enemy to be vanquished, but a part of the whole to be integrated, a source of immense power and creativity. They survive because when their body and mind are plunged into chaos, they do not panic. They learn to trust the intelligence of the process. They see it not as a breakdown, but as a breakthrough, and they find the support, be it in nature, in sacred texts, or in the rare transpersonal guide, to hold them as they are being remade. They surrender to the fire, knowing it is a fire of purification. They survive because when they are faced with the ultimate loneliness, they do not compromise their truth for the sake of belonging. They discover that the connection to their own deep self is more nourishing than the approval of the entire world. They learn to be their own sanctuary. Those who emerge on the other side are not the blissful, smiling saints of New Age fantasy. They are quieter. They are more sober. They are deeply, profoundly humbled. They are often scarred. But they are real. They have been burned clean of all that is false. They carry a stillness, a presence, a gravitas that is unmistakable. They no longer need anything from the world, and so they are free to love it for the first time, without agenda, without attachment. They do not survive their spiritual awakening by becoming invincible. They survive by becoming so utterly, completely, and courageously vulnerable that there is nothing left to be hurt. They have died and been reborn, and the life they now live is not an escape from suffering, but a deep, meaningful, and authentic participation in the great, terrible, and beautiful mystery of existence itself.